Okay, welcome to the Reputation Revolution. It's great to have your company. My guest today is obsessed with Tim Ferriss, author of the blockbuster The 4-Hour Work Week, but not in a way you'd imagine, and we'll get into that in a tick. His name is Mark Schaefer. He's one of the world's leading marketing authorities and speakers and a best-selling author in his own right. His blog, Grow, is hailed as one of the top marketing blogs in the world, and I highly recommend it. I read it every week. And his podcast, The Marketing Companion, has been downloaded over 1.2 million times. But for all of that, he's not getting calls from Oprah, and he can't even get a return call from his plumber. Mark, welcome to the show, my friend. What were you doing 10 years ago?
Yeah. I was working on my first book. Well, I'm delighted by that intro because it shows that you've read my new book and studied my new book and using it to make fun of me, which is perfectly good fun.
Indeed. Now, I want to rip into the book because there's so much to cover, but I'll let you give us a bit of your riff on it. But it's called Cumulative Advantage, How to Build Momentum for Your Ideas, Business and Life Against All Odds. And of course, against all odds, perfect timing coming out of COVID. This is a little bit different from what you've been writing in the past, but there are obviously themes that continue on from other books. What made you want to write this book, and is it your best? I think I've heard you saying you think it's your best one to date.
I think it is. That's really my only goal, is to write a book that's better than the last one. So it's getting harder and harder and harder because my books have been pretty successful. But what drove me on this, and if you think about it, I had an epiphany a few months ago that all the books I've written, they do sort of tie together. So the first book I wrote was the first book on influence marketing in 2012, before anybody was using that term. But the idea was that there was a shift in power in the world, and people could be using this power of the internet to be heard, to build their own influence. Well, people did it, and then there was too much content. So what do? How do we cut through? Then I wrote the content code. How does an individual use this power? I wrote known. How does a brand react to this new power? Marketing rebellion. So that leads us, here we are in 2021. And I think the problem today is, look, so many people are doing great work. We're following all the rules. We're creating epic content. We're being consistent. We're being great, and we're still being buried because the competition is so enormous. The amount of content is overwhelming. I read that just during the pandemic, the amount of content being published on LinkedIn doubled. It doubled in 1 year. So if you thought it was more difficult to stand out before, it's getting even more difficult. And when you get right down to it, Trevor, I think the essence of what I do, what you do, what businesses and marketers are preoccupied with is this: how can we be heard? And I'm just obsessed with this. How do we stand out in this noisy world? And it led me to this idea of momentum, that if you've sort of hit this plateau, we need to build momentum. And it led me to this research that started in the 1960s and has built and built and built. It's been applied to many different professional fields, but it's never been taken out of academia and really applied to individuals and our businesses. So that's the main idea behind this book. What is the pattern behind momentum, and how can we use it in a practical way?
So the cumulative advantage, you've done the whole book on it. I'm going to ask you to kind of encapsulate it if you can, because it's a big concept. Are you able to just encapsulate it, and then we can break it down into the elements that you've done? Because it's a phrase that's been around, but you've given it new meaning.
Yes. Well, as I said, it started out in a paper that was written in 1968 by a very famous sociologist named Robert Merton. Nobody listening today has heard of him because who can name any famous sociologist? Let's be honest. But the paper was very famous. It was called The Matthew Effect. And his idea here is sort of explaining why the rich seem to get richer and the poor seem to get poorer. And he did a study. The first study was on Nobel Prize winners and found that these were not necessarily the greatest scientists or researchers, but they had some advantage that they were able to use and played their cards right, so the momentum, their reputation would grow and grow and grow, and they would distance themselves from their competitors. This has been applied to sports, entertainment, education, even politics and health, technology. So what I was able to do in this book is sort of figure out how we can break this code. Because in Merton's research, he had this tantalizing line that this momentum will build in an unstoppable way unless there are countervailing processes. But he never told us what they were. And I became obsessed with this. And his son is still alive. Ironically, he won a Nobel Prize in economics. I think he learned how to do it from his dad. I said, I'm writing this book about your dad. I need to figure this out. What are these countervailing processes? He said, I don't know. But I'm not the person you need to talk to. You need to talk to his wife, my stepmother. She was his researcher. She's still alive, teaches at Columbia University. I contacted her, and she sent me all these unpublished papers that she wrote talking about what comes next. So she was very, very helpful to help me unravel this.
Fantastic. Now, I love the way you've kicked it off with a story between you, and this is where Tim Ferriss comes in, and using, going backwards between the two. Do you want to sort of walk us through that? Because it's actually fascinating and it breaks it down quite nicely. And Tim Ferriss, obviously, blockbuster author, but I'll let you tell the story.
Well, it was really a miracle. It was a miracle because what I was looking for, Trevor, when I was researching the book, I was looking for examples of people who seemingly came from nothing and became stars. So the book is loaded with different examples because I wanted to see if you're not born with some inherent advantage, if you're not born into a wealthy family, or you don't have a Harvard education, or you don't have connections with all these famous influencers, can you build momentum from a standing start? So I was just looking at all kinds of celebrities, and I got curious about Tim Ferriss because he's everywhere. He's sort of ubiquitous in media today. So I researched, how did this guy start? And I thought, there's nothing there. It was just so unexpected. And the more I learned about him, the more improbable his success became. And I document in the book, it's nothing that he doesn't say about himself, because he's vastly transparent about his background. But he was sickly, he was bullied, he had health problems, he had mental health problems. He suffered from depression. He had business problems, financial problems. Everything was wrong. And finally, he lost his business, lost his girlfriend, gave up on everything, went to Europe to try to figure things out. While he was in Europe, he had an idea for a book, which was rejected by 26 publishers. 10 years later, he's a media superstar, hanging out with LeBron James and Hugh Jackman and Oprah. And I'm not. And we started our careers. We both wrote our first books about the same time. And so I thought, this is a really interesting comparison, because 10 years ago, if you would have placed a bet, which one of us is going to know Oprah? You'd bet on me. And yet he's the one that did it. And so I thought, and then the way he did it matched up exactly with the research. It matched up exactly with these 5 steps. So it was literally, it was a miracle that this worked, that this case study just worked out so well.
It had to come out. Okay, let's go through those 5 steps, and then there's a couple of them I want to dig a bit deeper into them. So we have the initial advantage, the seam, sonic boom, reaching up, and constancy. Walk us a little bit through that so we can sort of get the pattern. And you've been putting these together, and then I'd love to really, I love the seam. I love the
Yeah, that's
idea
a
of the
big
seam.
idea. Um, someone interviewed me the other day, said, I've never heard of that idea before. I said, that's because I just made it up, dude. So the idea is that all momentum begins with some spark. It's some idea. And usually it comes from a random event. I think this is one of the big ideas in the book. And I think it should provide people with a lot of hope that even if you're just starting from a standing start, that these ideas, these opportunities are around you all the time, but you must pursue it. An idea is just an idea unless you embark on this quest and follow your curiosity. Now, what really makes the momentum work is when you follow your curiosity and it matches up with some need in the marketplace. A seam is an undefended or underdefended niche. It's what happens when there's suddenly newly unmet or underserved customer needs. It's a shift. It's a fracture in the status quo. Something has happened. It could be a change in taste. It could be a change in technology. It could be you can access people in a new way to distribute things. Or it could be even something like a pandemic. In the pandemic, almost everything is changing. We've changed how we learn, how we work, how we entertain ourselves, how we connect. Almost every part of our life has been shifted in some way, and each one of those fractures is a business opportunity. So now the momentum is building because we've sort of found a fit and things are taking off. Next, we need to build awareness. And in this chapter, if you're a marketing geek like I am, this is just a tremendous amount of fun to learn about some research, to think about building awareness in some different ways. Then I think comes a very powerful idea, reimagining mentorship. If you're stuck, if you're sort of plateaued, one of the fastest ways to build momentum is to reach out and get help from somebody who can sort of lift you into new opportunities, make new introductions. I challenge people in this chapter to reimagine mentorship. And then the final chapter, constancy of purpose. So now we're building momentum. We have something going, and something always goes wrong. And in those cases, we have this tendency to try to reach for something new, to panic. And what the best practice is to be aware and keep tuned in to what got you there. What was that advantage? What is your distinctiveness? And I'm not saying don't be aware of changes in the market because it could represent a new seam, a new opportunity. Maybe it's time to pivot, but we need to avoid what Jim Collins calls the doom loop, to just reaching for something new and then all of a sudden you've lost sight of what brought you your success in the first place. We need to surround ourselves with the people and the resources and the discipline to keep the momentum going in the end. So those are really the 5 big ideas.
And it doesn't really matter where you come from. I know you unpack in the book that, people that have had a head start, have got that, as you call it, the initial advantage. For people that haven't got, they're not born into the, a Hamptons family or something like that. How is it the bit they need the big idea to kick going, to kickstart everything? That's the key, and then they need to find the market to go through.
One of the things I'm finding, Trevor, is that when people read this book, they never see the world quite the same way again because you're aware of this pattern. So when you meet a successful person and they start telling you how they made their success, you'll hear, aha, that was the idea. It was something random. Something was shifting in the marketplace. He had the entrepreneurial courage and the discipline to go through this seam. And then he sort of had this boom happen that people were aware of him. And here's someone who helped him along the way. So it happens over and over and over again. I had someone talk to me the other day. He's a leader of a business. And he said, I can apply these ideas to my business because we were growing and growing and growing. And now we're sort of stuck. And your book made me reevaluate which stage we might be in and what we might do next to get to that next level. So it's really just recognizing this pattern and knowing how momentum works. Just understanding that can lead people to some success.
And a theme that I picked up on it, and something that I'm a huge believer in, is curiosity. You've mentioned the word already, and being curious, and how that's, being curious is being open to ideas and open to, themes and trends and that side of things. How important is it to be curious, and how do you think people should develop their curiosity? Because I'm fascinated with curiosity.
Yeah, it's a wonderful topic, isn't it? Sort of a mysterious topic in some ways. But curiosity, that it's not the idea that changes your life. It's the curiosity to pursue it. Um, there's a great quote in the book from Raji Thomas, the founder of Sprinkler, who has created and sold many successful businesses. I think this is his third or fourth. And he said, the world is filled with ideas. There are millions of ideas, but the difference is conviction. It's the quest. It's following up on the idea. And I think for me, there's this idea that I follow curiosity when I see something that doesn't fit. And it doesn't always turn into a new business idea, but it can turn into something that helps me along in my life. I'll give you an example. And I'm forgetting the exact thing, but today I was reading something in the news that just, and I'm sorry I can't remember off the top of my head the precise example because it's interesting. There's something in the news, and I read this, and it made no sense whatsoever. It just made no sense. So I pursued my curiosity and I read the article. I got deeper and deeper and deeper into the article, trying to understand how could this be? And when I finally figured it out, it led to a revelation that's it's gonna write a blog post, and maybe it'll inspire someone else. So in the book, I talk about this idea. If the dog isn't barking and you expect the dog to be barking, don't let it go. Figure out, why isn't the dog barking? Because there's a new idea there.
So with the seam, just want to tackle that a little
Yeah.
bit deeper. You use, for anyone who understands American football, can you walk us through that? Because once I read that, I thought, oh, of course, makes perfect sense. I love a good analogy, and it's a really good one. It'll really help people grasp the concept of the seam.
Well, in this chapter, I challenge people to rethink what strategy is about. When I was growing up in business, and in many companies today, strategy is a 5-year plan and a 100-page document. But today, the world is moving so fast that these opportunities are being created literally moment by moment by moment. And strategy today is like, I describe American football. So the two teams are face to face, strength against strength, and one team has the ball. And they have to figure out a way to get through that other line and advance, make some progress. Now, the coaches are actually in a booth above the field, and they're looking at the competition, trying to find an opportunity. Is one of the other players tired? Are they out of their position? Are they mismatched against one of our players? Could we take advantage of that opportunity and run that ball as fast as we can, as long as we can? Strategy becomes a function of space and time and speed, not a 100-page document. We're not worried about next year. We're not worried about 5 years from now. We're worried about what is happening right now that we can capitalize on these little micro fragments that are happening in our world every day. And can we apply our ideas, our core competencies our passions to meet those needs. Let me give you just a little personal example. When COVID hit, early on, I got the disease, and I was really sick for about 30 days or so. When I got out of my haze, I was suffering from hypoxia. I wasn't getting enough oxygen to my brain. I couldn't think, couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't concentrate on anything. Woke up and basically my business had crashed. I was a speaker without an audience, a consultant without customers, a college educator without a class. All our classes were canceled. And so I went through a few days of disorientation, and then I realized my core competency is a teacher. Now, what's going on in the world right now that I can apply this competency to the seam that's open right now? And I realized I still can be a teacher. I just need to teach something else right now. And I have a background in applied behavioral sciences, organizational development, that I don't really use in the marketing world all that often. But I realized I could start writing and communicating about how we deal with disorientation, with anxiety, with this overwhelming uncertainty. How can we fight and get to the other side? I was doing Facebook Lives. I stopped my marketing content, completely moved to this content about how do we get to the other side. Turned this content into a free ebook. Just gave it away, didn't even ask for an email address. Turned the ebook into a new speech. Suddenly, companies were hiring me. They're looking for content for their leadership meetings to inspire them to fight to the other side. By June, my business had turned around. June, July, August, I had record months because they knew me, they trusted me. They knew I was a teacher. They saw my content. They knew I could help them and inspire them. And I ended up having a pretty good year. And now the marketing business is starting to come back. So that was an example where things were shifting for me, but I used my competencies to burst through a seam and help people at their point of need, not 2 years from now or 3 years from now, but right now, for the next 6 months.
Right away.
What can I do to help people at their point of need?
Great example, and I followed that journey and very much watched the different type of content that you're putting out there, and that's something I want to unpack shortly in this chat. Just quickly with the sonic boom, just to bring that to life, because I love that concept as well. What's your favourite example of sonic boom in action as it pertains to cumulative advantage?
Well, it's really kind of a similar concept. I hadn't connected the dots until you just asked me that question. But the idea of the seam is like, do it now. Burst through with all your might. And that's the idea behind the sonic boom, too. So traditionally, at least in my world of public relations, we would think about a campaign. And a campaign might be 6 months, or a campaign might be a year, or even longer. And the idea behind the sonic boom is more or less, to the best of your ability, create ubiquity for a short period of time. Give it everything you've got so that people all of a sudden they kind of start seeing you in a number of places all at the same time. And you just focus on a period of a few weeks. You give it everything you've got in a period of a few weeks. Now, that's how I launched my last several books. It wasn't about a year. It wasn't even about a month. It was about a period of a few weeks where all of a sudden the book is seemingly everywhere, to the best of my extent. And I knew it was working when I saw a tweet from someone that said, "I've seen Mark Schaefer's book mentioned 4 times today. I guess I should go buy it." And that starts this snowball going. And the books that I launched in that manner are still selling really, really well today. Now, they're great books. You've got to deliver the goods. You can't trick people into reading something or loving something. But if you build that momentum and you have a good story, you have a good product to tell, then it sort of generates this momentum for your awareness that can carry on for years.
I like the word strategic omnipresence. So know where you want to be and just put all the efforts. And I guess we live in a multi-channel world, and it's a matter of doing that, and being across everything.
Yeah, the case studies lined up, Tim Ferriss, I learned, and again, it was just sort of miraculous. He did the same thing to launch his book. He realized, I don't have that much money, I don't have many resources, but I can go to this one niche who are these people, young tech entrepreneurs are hungry for my kind of advice. I'm going to give it everything I've got for that niche for a period of 2 weeks. And that's how he's launched all his books, and he's been very successful.
Want to shift gears, going back to where you've just mentioned how you have you've tackled different content, and I want to read something from your book here. You said, my drive and personal energy comes from trying new things. I have a history of reinventing myself about every 3 to 4 years. And I'd love to talk a little bit about reinvention, because we live in a world, and in marketing and particularly personal branding, where it's all about the niche and niche down, and a lot of this does make sense and everything, but it freaks a lot of people out, because when a lot of people are multi-dimensional and beings, and if they're professional, they've been around for 20 or 30 years, they've got lots of different ideas and knowledge and expertise, and they've got the scars on the knuckles to prove it. They've been in the trenches, and it's very hard to zoom in on one thing. But you've shown that, you started with social media, started with Twitter, influencer marketing, and have moved through broader marketing. One of your micro books, I suppose, mini books, was called Lessons About Chaos. And now you're talking about momentum. Just give us a riff on all of that, and what's your thinking behind it? Because I know a lot of people that get freaked out by, I have to box myself in, and we know about, focus and having a market and a positioning. How do you approach that? How do you approach your positioning? There's about 3,000 questions in one there, sorry.
Well, I've had the same 3 words at the top of my website for at least 10 years. It says marketing, strategy, humanity. And that's where I live. I love the intersection of those things: marketing, strategy, humanity. So the first point is that I have riverbanks. Those are the riverbanks that I stay in, because I do think consistency is important. If you build an audience and put time into it, if I started writing about Russian history, I would lose my whole audience. However, I have many interests. I love sports. I love art. I love history. I love traveling. I love food. I spend lots of time in nature, gardening and hiking. So I have all these interests, and I can bring those interests into my content. So I've written articles about something I've learned from art or history or my travels or visiting an art museum that provide some lesson about marketing, something I learned, something that I observed that I never thought of before. There was one blog post, I was watching this basketball game. I mentor these children. I went to their basketball game, and my kids' team was just slamming the other team. I think it was like 50-0. Finally, one kid from the other team stole the ball, dribbled down the court, threw the ball up, and made a perfect basket into the wrong hoop. He actually scored a basket for the other team. And the lesson was that it doesn't matter how hard you work and how well you execute if the strategy is wrong in the first place. So I was able to see something like that and bring it into a teachable moment, staying within those riverbanks. Now, that's on a micro level. On a macro level, I have evolved as a person. I rarely write about social media anymore, even though that's what kind of got me into it. I think a lot of people still think of me as a social media person because that's where I started. But I kind of became bored with the daily tips and tactics of social media, and I evolved into more strategic thinking, about influence, about content, about strategy, about personal branding. And I think when I wrote the book Known, it was really a risk because Known was about personal branding, and it tied up all these things about marketing and technology and humanity, but it was sort of taking a step almost toward being a self-help book instead of a marketing strategy book. But the book was huge because I didn't confuse my audience. So I was evolving as a person. I was growing. I was covering new topics that interested me. But because I could still stay within those riverbanks, I never lost my audience, and my audience is still growing. So I think it is possible to bring in lots of interests, to continue to evolve as a person. The way I think, the things I write about are going to be different 6 months from now than they are right now. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm still learning and I'm evolving, and I can't help but reflect that in my content and my brand.
And we look at the concept of thought leadership, and we both work in a worlds where most words have been rendered absolutely meaningless. Authentic, thought leadership, personal branding. I've just got to suck it up. But in terms of, I guess, with the types of content and everything, I mean, you get the inbound marketing crowd, and that not what they're doing is wrong, but you've got to address their challenges, their fears, what are the questions they're asking, and that's utility content and really great, and you can't go wrong being useful and helpful, right? But it's just one way. But when you look at thought leadership type content, you're actually poking people in the metaphorical eye. Like you're prodding them. Every time you read a Seth Godin post, it's like a slap in the face sometimes, because people don't really know what they don't know, and we want to be challenged and inspired with ideas. And it's a bigger leap to go to thought leadership versus just being an expert. And there's nothing wrong with being an expert and being known for the best in what you do. You had a great post the other day, a guy, Keith.
Yeah, Keith Jennings.
And he wrote about being and it was just an eye-opener, being the expert, the guide, and the agent. And, you can't be all things to all people anymore. How do you approach personal branding from your perspective? Because you've been building your brand, you're clearly a thought leader, you challenge people with your ideas. Your story, the content shock, was a real shock for a lot of people in the industry. Do you sort of plot and plan a lot, or is it going to be always ideas driven, and then your expertise and packaging your expertise comes off the back of that? So, your consulting and your coaching and everything else you do.
Well, I think it's an important idea and important strategy today, because the utility content is really aimed at SEO. I happen to believe that the heyday of SEO is over. I think that there's so much competition today. We know that Google keeps 51% of their search inquiries themselves. We don't even have an opportunity for it, right? They're keeping it for their own properties or their sponsors, their advertisers. So now you have to think, okay, how am I going to win the search results? Well, I'm in digital marketing. I'm never going to win the search results for digital marketing, because you need to win the top 2 or 3 search results for me against 100,000 people who are in digital marketing. And the 2 people at the top are going to be the mean junkyard dogs with the big budgets and the meanest SEO, professionals, and they're going to be going at it forever to win those 2 results. I'm not a junkyard dog. I'm never going to be. So I have to earn attention in a different way. I have to create thought leadership content that will earn attention based on my authority, by the quality of what I do. And I think the way I differentiate myself, I'm not known as the Facebook ads person. I'm not the Snapchat person. Really, I'm interested in a lot of different things. And I think what I'm known for is assessing the situation and telling the truth. And I have a pretty good track record of predicting what's going to be next, to say, look, I see this happening. This is what I think could happen next. This is a big trend. I don't see it working in the long term. And so people just sort of believe in that over time. And I'm fortunate that a lot of people have chosen to follow me and pay attention to me.
And in terms of the business model behind it, I mean, you've written an article at one point about how you get, there's 20 sources of revenue, and we won't go through all of them. But do you, how much do you sort of say this is the path I'm going to take from a business model perspective, and how much is opportunities come up because of your profile and the authority you've built and the reputation? And, oh, that sounds like a good idea. We could do that, and you can, make some income that way.
A lot of it really is, all of it really is sort of circumstantial. And I'll give you an example. I got a note on LinkedIn a few weeks ago from the CMO of a large pharmaceutical company, one of the biggest companies in the world. And she said, I read your Marketing Rebellion book, and we need this book. We need your help. Can you help us think this through and apply this to our marketing? We have a lot of changes going on, and we need to respond in this way. We need to be the most human pharmaceutical company, and we need your help. I didn't plan that. It just came out of the blue. And furthermore, that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. I mean, that is a case study in consistency, where over time, when you're just starting out, you'll get a little attention. After year 2, you'll earn more attention. And I've been doing this for 12 or 13 years now. And so my reputation has grown to the point where I can get the attention of a CMO from major companies, because I've been honest, I've been working hard, I've been generous, I've been transparent, I've been very helpful, and so it's paid off over time. And I haven't filled out an RFQ in probably 10 years. My reputation just builds and builds, and so people know, they trust me, they know how I think. I've given them glimpses into what I stand for and how I live my life, and they trust me. And when the opportunities come about, I'm the person that they call.
How important is that? And I know the answer, but a lot of people who are professionals who have been out there for a long time, and they're the ones who have got the information to share and the knowledge, are often the most reluctant to go out and share it. But you do share the behind the scenes, and probably more today than you probably did years ago. Share that behind the scenes of Mark Schaefer Inc. And the person. Was that a gradual thing over a period of time to just, I think Jay Bear once said it was opening a kimono, to let people into your life? Was it a conscious decision? Had it just evolved? Was it hard for you?
It was a little bit of both. When I entered the social media world, I was coming from a very buttoned down, Fortune 100 corporate environment. So I had this image that now I had this marketing advice, which I would create for my ideal personas, and on and on and on. And two things happened early in this immersion in social media. The first thing is that nothing happened. And the second thing is I got bored. I was writing made-up content for made-up personas. And so I just started to relax and add my personality. And if I felt upset about something, I said, I'm upset. If I felt funny that day, I might write something funny. And it was not natural at all, really, for me to share myself and what was going on in my life. And then there was a pivotal moment. There's a professional who I know you know, Ginny Dietrich. And Ginny is someone who I admire. And then on the American holiday of Thanksgiving, she posted this little video many years ago of her family at Thanksgiving. And everybody was saying hello. And I just thought, this is so simple. And she's like opening up her home and opening up her life and saying, this is where I am today. Why can't I do that? And so in that moment, I challenged myself to try to do that more. And every time I did, I was rewarded. People would say, "Oh, when you talked about this thing that happened to you, how did you know? I'm going through the same thing. How did you know? We were just talking about that at work." I thought, interesting. When I talk about things that are on my mind, things that are on my heart, then people respond because we're sort of we're creating this communion in this way, this emotional communion. And so I'm still not perfect. It's still something I have to work at all the time. Many times I'll create some content and then I'll go back and figure out how I can make it a little more personal because it doesn't come natural to me. And then I think in this new book, Cumulative Advantage, certainly this is the most autobiographical book I've ever written. And I was very self-conscious about that, thinking, why would anybody care about me and what I went through? But people, once again, they've responded saying, I love this. I love these stories. This taught me a lot. So once again, it worked.
Isn't that the ultimate personal branding too? We see some great marketers or people who are great at marketing and they craft beautiful websites and they've got their messaging down pat and everything's crafted on Instagram and everything and it just doesn't feel right. Yet they look the same as everyone else. And yet you put that personality in and that's your advantage. That's your differentiation. You know, the mote of differentiation around your brand is actually you and what you're interested in and what you're doing. Mark, been terrific to chat. As I say, I recommend people read your blog. You have two articles come out a week and very much on the dot and very well worth reading. The Marketing Companion podcast, the new book's called Cumulative Advantage. But also, you know, if you're interested in personal branding, and you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast if not, Known is the book for you. And the content code, if you're all about content marketing and want to crack through, and at a bigger level, a bigger, more holistic marketing level, Marketing Rebellion. So lots of books to get into, lots of content to dig into, and then follow Mark on all the socials. What's the website, Mark? The best website?
Businessesgrow.com. You can find all those resources are in one place at businessesgrow.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Been a pleasure.